The story of game shows is tied to high stakes, flashing lights, unforgettable moments. It's wild, weird, and wonderful. If you've ever sat on the edge of your seat, waiting eagerly to see if that contestant will answer that final question correctly, or maybe even spin that wheel perfectly, then you are in for a treat. This deep dive is going to cover the full history and development of game shows. Okay. So, are you ready? And if so, is that your final answer? In order to fully understand where game shows come from, we have to go all the way back to the 1930s. Far before television had its golden era, game shows got their start on, you guessed it, the radio. Radio in the early 20th century was the go-to destination for news, music, entertainment, and basically everything, of course. And at this moment in time, game shows were not exactly what we think of them as today.
And now let me introduce our four authorities. From right to left, first we have Oscar Levant, the pianist, composer, and author. Next comes Cornelia Otis Skinner, famous actress and writer. Then we have Franklin P. Adams, conductor of the Conning Tower. And finally, John Kieran, our sports expert.
There were no flashing lights, no physical challenges, and of course, no YouTubers trying to sell you their product every 2 minutes. But there was one key element present from the very beginning that would go on to shape the rest of the genre forever. Trivia. Let's get quizzy with it. Let's get quizzy with it. Let's get quizzy with it. Etc. Asking contestants questions. Simple, effective, somehow strangely captivating. Now, just like the history of most concepts, the exact moment in time where we had the first game show is a well-debated topic. But in this case, you will find multiple sources citing the very first game show to be the Brooklyn Eagle Quiz on current events. This was created by a local newspaper in 1923, and as the name suggests, it was a quiz on current events. Fast forward to 1938, and that basic concept was gaining traction and some serious popularity, with shows such as Information Please on NBC. The series featured a panel of experts attempting to answer questions submitted by listeners. In the early days, listeners were paid $2 for a question that was used, and $5 if the contestants couldn't answer it. So, plenty of incentive for tough questions, and the producers didn't even have to write them. Sounds like a good deal. The amounts question submitters were paid actually increased over time as well as the show gained more popularity and sponsorship deals, included from the cigarette company Lucky Strike. Other popular radio games of the time included Truth or Consequences in 1940. This one added more of a comedic, stunt-based facet to the genre. And it was that mix, popular even in 1940, of entertainment and trivia that sort of planted the seed for what would grow into the game show industry as we moved on. Fast forward to the 1950s, the world is transitioning from radio to television, and game shows are making the leap to the small screen too. And despite the size of that screen, the impact was, well, significant. i.e., they were bloody popular. One of the first game shows to hit it big was the $64,000 question, which first aired in 1955. It was a simple, high-stakes quiz show where contestants continued to answer questions for an increasing amount of cash. Sounds familiar, right? Pretty popular concept. That's because this particular format, answer a question,
Beddington and the stockbroker's clerk. That's correct.
Get money, answer another question, get more money, became increasingly popular as time went on. Audiences loved the drama of watching the contestants climb that metaphorical ladder from a small pot of money to life-changing sums. Ooh, the drama. Until one day contestants would actually be climbing literal ladders on things like Ninja Warrior, but yeah, we'll get there soon. Because first, talking about drama, things took a seriously dramatic twist. Scandal. That's right, the 1950s saw the first major game show scandal. Much to their dismay, audiences discovered that shows including 21 had predetermined outcomes, shall we say. To be more specific, it was discovered that contestants were given answers in order to create a manufactured drama and tension at just the right moment. Not ideal for trust. And it cannot really be understated just how much of a huge impact this scandal had on the industry, reaching all the way up to US politics at the time. In 1959, the House Subcommittee on Legislative Oversight held hearings on the topic. This led to Charles Van Doren, a famous contestant from the show 21, testifying in front of Congress that he was given answers before the show. Yikes.
Van Doren retracts his earlier denials of getting any assistance. He admits that he received dramatic coaching and the questions and many of the answers. But his statement is a rueful and moving realization that for his wealth and fame, he paid a bitterly high price.
The situation, of course, ultimately led to plummeting trust in game shows. Several of the big shows were cancelled, and of course, there was naturally a bit of a lull in enthusiasm for the formats at this time. However, despite the overwhelmingly negative press at the time, there were some positives to be gleaned from this moment. The controversy helped reshape the industry for the better, moving it towards fair practice and regulations that are in place even to today, to help ensure transparency and, making sure that it's not unfair. Post-scandal, we were primed for a boom as enthusiasm came back. And because of this exact reason, the 1960s to 1980s are considered the golden era for game shows. They helped introduce many famous formats, brands, and faces that we still know and love today. The genre was evolving simply beyond trivia. For example, Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall debuted in 1963 and introduced much more wide concepts and audience participation and sort of chaotic, wild stuff happening.
Beautiful new Admiral console, color television set, worth $899.
Would participants simply take the money or risk everything for what's behind the curtain? What could be behind the curtain? Game shows had started to become much more about human psychology than simply the game itself. This really helped level up the excitement. Will the contestant walk away with a car or a goat?
And finally, 144 square feet of flint coat floor tiles, simple to put down because the adhesive's on the back.
Or a particular favourite of mine being Bullseye from 1981 onwards, will the contestant walk away or drive away with a speedboat? There's quite a common theme with that show. All good questions. And now I want to rewatch Bullseye.
£10 question, Di. Please spell a word that means accompanying or coming with, and the word is concomitant.
C-O-N-C-O-M.
The reboot of The Price is Right hit screens in the US in 1972, bringing with it a whole new level of audience engagement. It was no longer about sitting in your chair and watching. It was no longer about getting up and answering questions. Contestants were using their everyday knowledge in order to guess the prices of groceries, cars, clothing, you name it. This simple yet relatable concept really struck a chord with viewers, helping to cement the show's place in popular culture, and, of course, it remains there as it's still on air today. Other games debuting at this time include Wheel of Fortune and Family Feud, all again introducing new layers and ideas and concepts in order to engage audiences and utilize contestants. They tapped into universal themes and ideas, with word puzzles, family battles, and more, making it easy for audiences to connect with them. What's key to understand in terms of that rising popularity here as well is that these shows weren't just about the formats, the contestants, or the audience anymore, but they were also about the hosts, the personality that was guiding everything through. Richard Dawson, Bob Barker, Pat Sajak. I mean, these became household names. Their charm and charisma was just as much to thank for the success of these shows as the gameplay itself.
We'll win everything in the showcase. Yes, Connie! And it will happen right after this.
Moving into the 1990s, things really started to heat up again. Game shows, like most things in this decade, got bigger, flashier, more intense. One game changer, pun intended, was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which debuted in the US in 1999, hosted by Regis Philbin. This show took the high-stakes format to a whole new level with its progressive jackpot structure, starting with small questions for small amounts, building all the way up to that $1 million question. The tension was palpable. The lighting, music, and that famous line, "Is that your final answer?" It took quiz shows and it put them back at the forefront of what was must-watch television. But of course, I must note that this format was not originally from the US, but was in fact developed and screened first in the UK, which makes this the ideal moment to branch off into some international territory. See, the UK has a long tradition of producing game shows that have gone on to become cultural staples, hugely influencing the US and other international territories. Let's take some examples, starting with Mastermind, 1972. One of the most intellectual and serious quiz shows in UK history, known for its intense atmosphere. Contestants sit in a darkened studio, answering specialised questions. It's become iconic for its no-nonsense, high-stakes tone, and its huge contrast to more casual formats. And the combination of that tone, celebrity guests, and people answering their specialist subject and sometimes totally messing up, does lead to the odd viral video even today. Countdown, 1982. The show made its debut on the very first day of Channel 4, and it's still going strong today. Countdown is a mix of word puzzles and number challenges, and it gave rise to a whole new subgenre of educational quiz shows. It's not as flashy as its American counterparts, but its longevity speaks volumes about the appetite for cerebral competition in the UK. I mean, even look at what we have now with things like Only Connect and these increasingly complex, difficult quiz shows. Yeah, Countdown is certainly part of that. Today the show is also of course famous for its mashup with 8 out of 10 Cats, another panel show. And yeah, we do seem to do this quite well in the UK, mixing and mashing things together and creating comedy from quiz shows and quiz shows from comedy, and yeah.
Peter, are you a fan of word games?
Well, to be honest, Jimmy, I don't think that's any of your business.
Kind of fun, even things like Mock the Week. I mean, it's half quiz show, half entertainment. If there's one UK game show that stands out for its creativity and scale, it's The Crystal Maze. Contestants navigate through themed zones and solve physical and mental challenges, all under time pressure. The show was groundbreaking for its interactive set design and blending of mental and physical games, setting the stage for future adventure-based game shows. And maybe even setting the stage for things like Hole in the Wall, which I still can't believe is a real thing until I see clips of it on like TikTok, and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. Feels like some sort of fever dream from my childhood. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, 1998. Of course, before we had Regis Philbin in the US, and of course this major global success, the humble beginnings of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire were indeed in the UK. In this edition, we have Chris Tarrant asking the questions, including the iconic, "Is that your final answer?" The show redefined the genre by introducing a new level of tension with its multiple choice format, the possibility of using lifelines, and of course the chance to win £1 million, bloody massive prize. The format's been replicated worldwide, and it showcases very clearly the UK's significant contribution to game show history and culture. But then a couple more. What about The Weakest Link in 2000? Hosted by Shark Tongue and Robinson, The Weakest Link brought a new dynamic to game shows by mixing general knowledge questions with brutal rebuttals.
Have you always been a prat? Have you got a best friend called Noddy?
A little bit tired, a little bit emotional, and a little bit stupid.
Grandad?
No.
Are your legs giving out yet?
I'm sorry, I missed that completely.
About the hairdo?
Yes. Have you thought of going to a good hairdresser?
My sister did my hair, actually.
And often humiliating eliminations, courtesy of Anne. This harsh tone from the show was its hallmark, and it was adapted to, I think, over 70 countries, which is wild.
사상 올스타즈のデビュー曲は何?
And you know what? If we're going to have a look at other countries that have contributed greatly to this space, I'm going to name two in particular: Japan, the Netherlands. Let's start with Japan. Japan has a unique take on quiz show culture which veers away slightly from the West's quiz-heavy sensibilities, shall we say. Japanese game shows are more known for their physical challenges, their creativity, and often bizarre premise. Japan's influence on global game show culture has grown, with many Western properties borrowing from Japan's out-the-box thinking. For example, what about Takeshi's Castle from 1986? This is perhaps one of the most famous Japanese game shows internationally. Known for its larger-than-life obstacle courses, contestants face outlandish, sometimes painful physical challenges, all with a comedic edge. Western versions of similar concepts, for example, Total Wipeout, which I think is a total disgrace that it ever got cancelled. What a brilliant game show that was. And many others. How about Sasuke from 1997? Or, as it's better known, and you may have heard of, Ninja Warrior. This is a game show where contestants face incredibly difficult obstacle courses. Its popularity has led to many international versions, including the very creatively titled American Ninja Warrior and Ninja Warrior UK. 10 out of 10. The format focuses on personal achievement and endurance rather than knowledge or luck, a hallmark of Japanese game shows. perhaps tied also to more wider cultural differences in Japan, where gambling laws are far more strict than in Europe or the US, where games are often required to be at least somewhat skill-based rather than entirely based on luck. But, seeing as we've mentioned Europe, how about we dive into that second country that's hugely influential in game show culture? The Netherlands. We'll take 3 extremely popular game shows, beginning with Deal or No Deal from the year 2000. Believe it or not, this global sensation originated in the Netherlands. The original Dutch version, I'm going to attempt to pronounce this. Do they say the J like yeah? I think they do. Millionenjacht.
Miljoenenjacht.
Inspired similar formats around the world, including the UK and US versions. The show's combination of pure luck psychology and high stakes made it a breakout almost everywhere it aired. How about Big Brother from 1999? While not a traditional game show, Big Brother, which again, as I said, originated in the Netherlands, had a profound impact on reality competition shows. It introduced the concept of placing contestants in a confined space while the audience watches their every move, leading to eliminations and winners. Kind of like a game show, right? It sort of blurred the line between reality and game show, if you will. And I suppose it has now gone on to inform many other game shows that also blur and introduce reality elements, like The Circle. Or even somehow weirdly, it makes me think of like Love is Blind and other stuff like that on Netflix. Like, maybe without Big Brother and without game shows and without, the 1930s and everything that happened, like, maybe we wouldn't have reality TV in the same way. But that's a whole other video. Sticking to game shows, there's one more from the Netherlands I want to talk to you about, and that is The Traitors. Originating in the Netherlands, De Verraders, again, hope I'm saying that correctly, is a psychological reality competition that blends elements of traditional game shows with strategic deception, similar to the popular after-dinner game Mafia. Contestants are divided into 2 groups, Faithfuls, Traitors, with the latter secretly plotting to eliminate the faithful one by one. The faithful must identify and expose the traitors before it's too late. And the show's mix of social strategy, deceit, and tension again has made it a huge breakout success in almost every territory it's aired, including the UK and US. And I had a look on its Wikipedia page at where it's been commissioned recently, and it's like global. If it's not aired yet, and you're in the country watching this video, they're basically making it. Like everywhere from Croatia to Iceland, you're getting The Traitors, so get ready. So yeah, the Netherlands, Japan, UK, USA, between these 4 countries, man, there are some gigantic, globally successful mega hits. Ooh. So we've talked a lot about radio, and we've talked a lot about television. What's the next clear step in the evolution of game shows? Of course, where could they possibly go? Heading back to our timeline, as we cruise into the 2000s, internet access around the world brings with it the first experiments in online game shows. The internet offered real-time participation from a global audience to win prizes from something that they had in their pocket. This new era of game shows would help to bring the instant gratification of mobile apps with the thrill of live events and, yeah, that sort of like being in the moment vibe that you get. Bringing millions of people together from many territories to have a shared experience. One of the earliest examples of online game shows is You Don't Know Jack from 1995, an irreverent trivia game initially designed for CD-ROM but later adapted for the web. Players would compete against friends or strangers in real-time quizzes, and while it wasn't exactly a game show per se if you want to be strict with it, this real-time multiplayer format was moving us towards something new. Another example was 1 vs 100 from 2009, and although this game show was originally produced for television, it was adapted for Xbox Live. In this version, a large number of participants online could compete, but one was chosen as the contestant against the rest. That's where that sort of 1 vs 100 title comes from. And this was groundbreaking, okay? Because this is one of the first moments where we've had the blend of a traditional game show with the formats and distribution of online multiplayer gaming. However, it was discontinued just 1 year later after it debuted in 2009 and shut down in 2010, just due to various complexities and technical issues, sadly. However, the most significant development The ultimate crown for mobile apps that were also game shows came in 2017, and I know many of you will have played it and you'll be shouting the answer right now, but it was, of course, HQ Trivia. HQ Trivia's appeal lay in its simplicity and timing. Every day at set times, a host would appear on the user's screen simultaneously, asking everybody who was watching and participating a series of 12 questions. Players had just 10 seconds to answer a question each time, and if they managed to answer all 12 successfully, they would split a cash prize with the other winners. The prizes started small, but of course over time as popularity increased, so did sponsorship and celebrity endorsements and all sorts of things. They became huge. In fact, I think it's worthwhile breaking down HQ's success into 3 particular elements. Number 1, live interaction. Unlike TV game shows, HQ Trivia was happening in real time on your phone. The chat function allowed users to engage with each other and to react to the host and questions as the game progressed. 2, accessibility. Anyone with a smartphone could play, making it globally accessible to millions of people. Like that. 3, prize incentives. The app offered real money as prizes to millions of people, creating urgency and excitement immediately. At its peak, HQ Trivia was gigantic, with millions of people tuning in every single day. Buzz, buzz, buzz. That's right, it was a super buzzy property in the game show world. However, despite its huge, gigantic initial success and getting over 12 million downloads, due to financial issues and potential mismanagements, eventually HQ Trivia shut down for good.
Cuz I don't want to get splashed. My coat.
My iPad.
Your iPhone.
My phone, it wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be.
And bizarrely, that happened in early 2020. A moment in human history, le pandemic, where you may have just sort of thought like HQ Trivia would be positioned to just grow and grow and grow even more. Everyone in their house, multiple lockdowns type of thing in many, many countries. So, my goodness, poor timing. How about something we've not touched on yet? I'm of course talking about social media. Game shows did indeed begin to evolve to include social media aspects and did evolve to become created specifically for platforms, whether it was YouTube and Twitch and for streaming purposes, or whether it was for TikTok and Facebook. So let's have a look again at some examples of how this actually worked. Twitch, of course, is a platform predominantly for streaming. Therefore, it makes sense that you could do game show-like content on there. Straightforward. Various streamers began to develop their own trivia-based content, and some of them drew in large audiences. These audiences could participate by answering questions or making decisions in real time or influencing things, again, blurring the lines a little bit with reality television, as we've touched on slightly previously. To give a very specific example, Facebook actually made a push into the game show market in 2018. You remember Facebook Watch? Yep, that was the thing for a bit. Well, Facebook Watch launched something called Confetti. This was a live interactive trivia show similar to HQ Trivia. It aired daily with cash prizes and had some social elements like, showing your friends your answers and progress as you went along. Makes sense, right? They've connected 1 billion people. Be nice to use that network to push forward a game show. Cool idea. But while Confetti built up a significant user base, it was ultimately cancelled again in 2020. A lot of stuff got cancelled that year. A lot of stuff. Focusing specifically now on the 2010s and the early 2020s, we've seen a massive shift in how game show content is being consumed. With platforms such as YouTube and TikTok, online creators are building their own versions of traditional game shows, but of course, still sticking to those basic tenets. Competition, high stakes, entertainment value. And perhaps no one epitomizes this trend more than MrBeast. So let's take a look at some of the ways he has been using the blueprint of game shows to thrive. Challenges and competitions. Whether it's staying in a circle for the longest time, whether it's being 100 years old and competing with someone who's 1 year old, MrBeast takes the basic challenge element of traditional game shows like Survivor and the Crystal Maze, and he turns it up to 11. He really goes for it. The goal is usually the same: outlast, outperform, outsmart your fellow contestants to win a prize. And speaking of those prizes, they are often very much high stakes. With usually a lot of money or a prize like a Lamborghini or something on the line, we can compare this to, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Deal or No Deal, and many other famous game shows where part of the tension and part of the excitement comes from just how much this prize would change the person's life. And that's not just interesting for the contestant, of course, but the audience. And that's another huge part of what he's done here. MrBeast encourages the audience watching online to participate by joining in engagement metrics such as comments, likes, shares, but also subscribing, participating in giveaways, and other things like this. They really feel part of what's happening on screen. So of course, on this point, one of the main similarities between traditional game shows and online content is their focus on spectacle. Shows like The Price is Right and Takeshi's Castle were not only famous for their format, but for just how grand the sets were and how crazy things could get. MrBeast and other online creators, of course, are very aware of this, and they've leveraged that production design, that over-the-topness of game shows to create, amazing viral moments online. When it came time for me to create my own game show, of course, part of the reason I'm doing all this research, I wanted to lean into those principles too. In fact, even my basic idea to open a mystery box store, something I've never seen anyone do, is deeply rooted in gaming culture.
We're opening the world's first mystery box store.
But I wanted to find a way to do a few more things too. First of all, location was super important for this game show. It had to take over an empty shop in the city centre. Why? To help be part of transforming things and doing something positive in an area that maybe felt a little bit forgotten about. Any prizes would be purchased or sourced from the local businesses around, again to support them and the local community and create this sort of buzz that everyone would be like, oh, do you know what's happening down there? Like locally, which I think is really cool. Of course, I wanted to incorporate spectacle and challenges too, so we live streamed the whole thing on YouTube and we had a giant Wheel of Fortune, and anyone that did manage to get a box after winning that Wheel of Fortune may have opened the challenge box. So again, there's layers to this thing, and again, you're ramping it up and ramping it up. I've learned my lessons, I really have. Because the fast-paced nature of internet content basically encourages creators to pack as much as they can into the smallest amount of time, quite often. And that's something they've learned from game shows, where you constantly up the stakes and ramp things up. Quick eliminations, fast-paced rounds, big payoffs, constantly keeping the audience on their toes. It sounds like the format of a game show, but it also sounds like the way you edit a YouTube video. These things are indeed tied together. And of course, even though we've looked at MrBeast here specifically, there are many examples of this. And if I'm gonna take one from the UK where I am right now, I would say Sidemen, who've also leveraged the success of other game show formats to do their own spin on something, but also created their own. For example, 20 Women versus 1 Sidemen is a series they do, and that's a game show format, of course. So in terms of the development and what the internet has done to game show formats, it's basically reframed ever so slightly what the prize is for the producer. There are financial incentives still, there are sponsorships, but we're a long way from the 1930s when a radio game show could be sponsored by a cigarette company.
And while you relax a bit, and we all do, I'm going to call on my good friend Bob Shepard with some important and helpful news for anyone who is suffering from common rheumatic and arthritic-like pains. Bob?
Well, thank you very much, Jack. Now, friends, an important new advance has been made in the relief of common rheumatic and arthritic-like pains due to stiff, aching joints. It's Zeraman.
Now we have a new prize in town. Engagement. Likes, comments, shares, subscribers, followers, building an audience on a platform. Of course, broadcast television and radio might be chasing ratings and trying to get something popular, but it's a sort of slightly new way to think about that, as the online audience are directly interacting, and that's a measure of success, just as much.
This is PBS.
So yes, as we've explored, despite the changing medium, faces and formats, the basic tenets of game shows apply from the radio all the way through to the internet. Competition, spectacle, and the chance to win big.
Okay. Yes, Connie!
So yes, the internet has transformed the way we consume game show content and the way we think about the success of it, but I think it's important to note that no format dethroned the other. radio and TV game shows still remain incredibly popular, whether you're listening to Popmaster on Radio 2 or watching The Chase while you eat your tea. And even though with some developments they failed to be quite as successful, such as online gaming communities and social media apps, they are of course still there too. And as we move towards augmented reality glasses, AI integration with everything, and God knows what else in the near future and distant future, there are some concerns. In May 2024, Netflix hit the headlines for introducing an AI chatbot contestant in its popular show, The Circle. Black Mirror vibes, of course, ironically, as Netflix own that now. But doesn't everything kind of give off Black Mirror vibes these days? I don't know. We are bound to have some modern AI-related update to a game show scandal at some point in the future. Although I don't think anything could still beat the UK Who Wants to Be a Millionaire coughing scandal, where the person was coughing a number of times for the right answer. I mean, it was made into a play, it was made into a TV show. That story is just so wild. You should go have a look at that if you've not come across it before. Of course, we know technology will advance, but we also know for sure that those basic principles will always apply. So it doesn't really matter what the format is. It's all about creativity and sticking to the basics. Essentially, I think we can all rest assured that game shows will continue to survive and thrive because, of course, they are connected to something much deeper. These formats tap into some of our most basic desires: the thrill of competition, the dream of winning big, the satisfaction of knowing the right answer at the right moment. But more than that, they give us a real glimpse into human nature itself. Whether it's watching someone take a huge risk on Deal or No Deal, or marveling at someone's encyclopedic knowledge on an episode of Jeopardy, we're drawn to these moments of triumph, tension, and of course, sometimes heartbreak. And I look forward to a lot more of that in the future. Thank you very much for watching.